conference finals are all set. Hey everyone, this is Spectator Sports. I'm your host Sebastian Fonseca. Please do us a favor to help Spectator Sports grow. Please drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you liked clips from this episode, you can get it here on YouTube in our playlist, if not on TikTok and Instagram as well. And if you want to get the audio from this podcast, we got that too here on Spotify. The Dallas Mavericks have advanced to the conference finals, and I was very impressed, especially in games 5 and 6. Luka Doncic found the range in game 5 after struggling for the first 4 games, especially from deep. He knocked down a bunch of triples and just had his way kind of manipulating the OKC defense to his every whim. And that set up for them to close out the OKC Thunder in Game 6. In Game 6, it was very poor start, sloppy Dallas Mavericks, and the Thunder leapt up for a very big first half lead, piled on to make it 17 midway through the third quarter, and this is when Kyrie Irving had his masterful shot-making abilities on full display on prime time on Saturday night. I thought that he used every bit of shooter's touch, especially in that second half. You see, he kind of lets the game adapt and go to him. He's a little bit more passive, setting up his guys in first halves in this postseason run. But the second half, he's a little bit more aggressive, especially from a scoring aspect. We saw that in Game 6. And to break the tie when it's 110, I thought he used every bit of shooter's touch that he needed in his power and aura. That it took the back iron, it took a short hop and dropped right in, and the Mavs needed every little point that they could because Shea was phenomenal late, yet again, carrying the Thunder. I thought that anytime he was looking to attack the rim, he got to it with ease, but if he didn't, and that pathway was shut off, he was going to make a easy mid-range jump shot just by getting the space that he is so known to do. But surprisingly, he was very good also from the outside. I thought that his three-point shot, that was the best display I've seen from him in a long time, and that's maybe something to add in for next season. PJ Washington, I thought, struggled is just because of just not getting into a rhythm. Early on, plagued by foul problems, his rhythm was off, he just couldn't get into the flow of the offense, and he was passing wide open shots and kind of deferring to Kyrie, Luka, and even Derrick Jones Jr. And Derrick Jones Jr. I thought was great. He was attacking the rim, he had some excellent corner threes and also playing spectacular defense. He's doing this on a veteran minimum, and he's going to be in for a big payday this offseason. But big shout out to Derrick Jones Jr. His play, his 22 points was crucial for the Mavs' comeback efforts. Plus, you add in the factor that PJ, while struggling early, turned it on late. He made a couple of corner threes in the fourth quarter. And then as the last sequence, the Mavs are down 1. Luka gets a little trapped but finds the open PJ Washington in the corner. You're thinking it's going to be a corner 3. Mavs go up by 2. But SGA fouls him on the 3-point attempt. I understand that there was maybe some controversy there on the replay because he got ball first, and on the follow-through, he got PJ Washington's elbow. And that's tough. Obviously, in replay, it's worthy, but by the letter of the law, I do think it's a foul. And PJ, not the best of free throw shooters in recent memory, knocked down the first 2 to give the Mavs the lead. And that's mission accomplished. All you do then, clank it and hope that they missed the desperation heave. And that's exactly what they did. Great last-minute ball execution, the intentional miss, leading up to a rebound on a desperation heave, missed, and the Mavs are going to the Western Conference Finals for the second time in 3 years. Talking about what else the Mavs have done, they have just been so gritty, physical, handling this Oklahoma City Thunder team that many thought would be in the conference finals at least just because of how good they were this season. But they may not have the knockout punch with the Mavs, but they have such a deep team. Derek Lively Jr., I mean, what a phenomenal game for the rookie center. I thought that he was targeted so many times, whether it was through intentional fouls and maybe just dealing with the assignment that is Chet Holmgren. Not an easy thing because he's just so long, but he bullied him in the paint, especially in post moves, offensive rebound opportunities, and he knocked down his free throws. So credit to Derek Lively Jr. I thought he was excellent. He was very clutch and definitely deserves far more minutes than what he's getting. Maybe the offense maybe does a little bit better when going through him. But I thought the Mavs were excellent. They're just so gritty, so physical, and they're going to set up for a very fun Western Conference Finals matchup with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I love this Mavs team. I mean, are they perfect? No, but they do get the job done. It's not pretty, but it's gritty, it's grinded out basketball, and it's going to be a very exciting matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals. We will remember this Oklahoma City Thunder team as them returning to the league as a contender. Now, as the number 1 seed, the youngest ever in NBA history, I thought they were great in the regular season, but there's certainly signs that they're just too young, not quite ready for the moment, and they're just getting started. They're just scratching the surface of their potential. They have the bona fide star in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Jalen Williams is only in year 2, and he will slowly continue to develop as he gets more experience under his belt. And Chet Holmgren, while redshirting his rookie year, was great in his true rookie year, and I thought that he was great on the defensive end. I think something that they'll need to work on is just getting Chet bulkier, being able to bang against other bigs. He's great as a power forward, a weak side shot blocker, but there are definitely times that he's going to need to use his frame to outbox and get rebounds, because Jared Lively just owned him in the paint, especially for the offensive glass, and that kind of led to their demise. We know that the weak point for OKC is their size, and that's something that they'll need to look at. They'll need to find another big maybe, and let Chet operate as a power forward, or just try to get a little bit more bench depth in the size conversation. I do think that a veteran guard, somebody who's maybe like a 6-man and that can play in clutch time minutes, would be great, just to be another creator, another scorer, and also just a guy that it's been established as well. I think that would be excellent for the Thunder. They just need a little bit more veteran mentorship than what Gordon Hayward has been, because he hasn't even been able to even see the floor as of late. We know those Josh Giddey moments. They weren't anything substantial in this playoff run. He just was basically played off the court, eventually benched for Isaiah Joe. I think Isaiah Joe is a great kind of bench player. He can start in limited minutes, but we saw when he was starting in place, he also struggled with that extra assignment, extra minutes being played. So he's a great spark off the bench, but I don't think he's a starting point guard. So that's something they'll have to look at in this offseason to help out the Thunder going forward. But the future is bright for the Thunder, absolutely. Many NBA fans have fallen in love with this rendition of the New York Knicks. They have this rough, tough mentality. They have the Nova Big Three. The small guard, Jalen Brunson, is leading the charge, being a MVP candidate. I thought that he was bringing a winning culture from Villanova to New York, something we haven't seen in decades. But in a cruel twist of fate, the injury bug has just bit them so hard this year. I mean, think about it. They have lost Bojan Bogdanovic. They have lost Julius Randle already. Both those players didn't even start a game in the postseason. They had lost OG Anunoby to a hamstring injury in Game 2. They lost Mitchell Robinson to re-aggravating his stress fracture. Jalen Brunson is banged up. They are just simply running out of bodies, and I felt that the Pacers just took advantage of that. They did a great job responding from the 0-2 deficit, trailing from 3-2. Every time the series shifted back to Indianapolis, they were able to hold serve. They maintained the pressure on the Knicks. We can talk about maybe they took advantage of a weakened Knicks team, that the Knicks weren't at their best, but you can only play who is in front of you. And I think the biggest thing is, while we can acknowledge the injuries and kind of mourn this lost season for the Knicks, we also have to celebrate the Indiana Pacers. They have not made the conference finals in a decade, and they've been in a rebuild since trading Paul George. And I thought that Tyrese Halliburton is certainly the franchise player to build around for Indianapolis for years to come. They made the trade earlier this year to get Pascal Siakam. I thought he's been great. He's their leading scorer in this postseason run. Tyrese Halliburton set the tone in Game 7. He attacked the Knicks. He knew that they were laboring with weakened bodies, injured bodies, slower bodies, tired bodies, whatever you want to call it. He went after them. 4 triples in the first quarter, and this paced the Indiana Pacers, no pun intended, to a 15-point lead. And despite the Knicks cutting it to as low as 6 in the second half, they continued to come out with answer after answer to any Knicks run to quell the storm and make sure that they would book their spot in the conference finals. I thought that he got some help from Miles Turner, but let's also talk about Nembhard and Nesmith. Both of those guys combined to just miss only 2 shots to get that kind of production, that amount of high efficiency, and that was partially the fact that they were shooting almost 70% as a team for much of this game. It took a couple of bad shots late to drop that down to 67%, but that still is a playoff record in an NBA game. Yes, it took some wild sequences, some wild production, and then maybe the injury gods frowning upon the Knicks for them to advance. But still, they got the job done. They were set with a task, and they did so. And we should give the Pacers credit for just taking advantage of that. I think they're setting up for an interesting matchup with the Boston Celtics in the conference finals, which we'll preview later. But certainly is an interesting sequence nonetheless. For the Knicks, they just simply ran out of bodies. It's very clear they came into this year already missing 2 guys in their rotation. And when guys have to step out and step up, that sends the whole rotation into a flux. And I don't think we can totally blame Thibodeau. He was just working with what he had. He had to play guys heavy minutes, and they were also willing to do so. And eventually some things were just fluky. The Bogdanovich injury was totally fluky. The hamstring injury, I mean, that is fluky. That is somebody just making a hard run. It could happen in any given moment. The Brunson hand fracture that eventually knocked him out of the game was fluky. You look at those sequences, maybe things turn a different way in a different season, and they're in the conference finals. But I think they have a very good base, and I don't think they have to make a big change. They're going to get some players back. The biggest thing is just figuring what to do with Julius Randle. I don't think he has a place on this team anymore. His role has kind of been phased out, and they can find somewhere else to use his salary, use those dollars for somebody else. We know that there's a lot of hot commodities with wing players out today with the offseason coming up. We have Paul George, Brandon Ingram, Jimmy Butler, for example. They're all trade candidates. They all could also leave in free agency depending on how things work in their contracts. But it certainly begs the question, are they going to make a big splash move? I think it's really just tampering with it. Firstly, you have to bolster the depth, and you have to find maybe another guard that can create. They certainly have a bunch of forwards, and I think they're fine on that front. The bigs, Hartenstein is good. Mitchell Robinson, when healthy, is good. So you have 2 really good centers. Then the wings are fine. I think OG is going to be fine going into next year, and they'll be very healthy. But the real question is, can they just get another guard? I know Dante DiVincenzo is there. They should absolutely keep him by all means. But just a guy maybe off the bench. They don't need a lot, but I think a guy that can just take 15, 20 minutes amongst all these players who have the ability to bring up the ball, they create, they run some sets, and just take some load off of Jalen Brunson. There was a time where he was just simply carrying the offense with the Knicks. Maybe in the conference finals, if they get there, they advance that far, he can take on 40, 45 minutes a game. But going into it, anything before that, he should be playing the max about 42 minutes in the postseason, unless it's an overtime game, of course. And that would just keep his legs fresh, because he is a guard that can easily wear down just given his size. And they just need to find just a little bit of offense and just distribute that out just to give these guys a little bit more rest, make them fresher, and also prevent Josh Hart from playing complete games. So that is appreciated. I think he'll go down as a recent Knicks legend, absolutely. But the Knicks are in great shape. The East is still the fairly weaker conference unless we see some massive moves this offseason for players escaping the West and heading back East. But I think the Knicks are in very good shape. They just need to maybe find either an elite wing that's out there on the market, or just make a kind of a small move and get their bench depth bolstered through the guard play. But the Knicks are absolutely in good shape for next season. The Wolves stunned the Denver Nuggets after giving up 3 consecutive losses in the middle part. They came out with a resounding punch in Game 6, beating the Nuggets by 45 points, setting up an epic Game 7 on Sunday night. I thought with the momentum that the Wolves were bringing, that definitely lifts their spirits, because the Nuggets were just dismantling them at home. Both games were won quite comfortably, and it just brought momentum, gave them hope, gave them life. And especially after Game 5, I thought that the Nuggets were just in firm control and they would close this out in 6. Well, I was wrong. While the Nuggets have struggled on the road, going back to home court in Denver, they have the altitude, they're familiar, and they had a little bit more time to rest. I thought that it should be advantage Nuggets, and it looked like that. First half, Jamal Murray is cooking. He is making threes, he's catching and shooting, he's making shots off of pin down screens. Nikola Jokic is kind of letting the game get to him, but he's being very efficient as well. And they race out to a 20-point lead in that third quarter. Well, that evaporated by midway through the quarter, and then almost next to nothing heading into the fourth. Big time shout out to the defensive play from Anthony Edwards. He set the tone in the second half. Not the best game offensively. You'll see if you're just looking at the box score, 6 out of 24. Paltry efficiency, we get it, but the defensive impact was there. He was playing the lane, and I thought that he was disruptive, getting into the passing lanes, but also just finding open shooters. He was kind of a shot creator in this Game 7. He found Jaden McDaniels wide open. I thought Jaden was excellent. He made so many corner threes. He just burned them time in and time out with 23 points. Mike Conley was timely as well. He made some off-the-dribble threes, and he was greatly missed in Game 5, but returned for Games 6 and 7. Cat set the tone as well. He was very good on the offensive glass and playing timely defense when being rotated on, and actually seemed to be the better matchup between him and Gobert on Nikola Jokic. They just kind of chipped away at it, and then the fourth quarter was very back and forth, but the Nuggets just didn't seem to have it. They ran out of gas, and Anthony Edwards just really put, and by his words, he put Jamal Murray in jail. After scoring 24 points, he only had 12 in the second half. I thought that he just didn't seem to have it, and the size factor, the strength factor just bothered him. We can talk about the injury, whatever. He was playing. He looked fine for the first half. I don't think this magic injury that either the elbow, the calf, whatever happened in this postseason, when we can't just simply blame it on the injuries. We have to give credit to the Minnesota Timberwolves. We saw that when that turnaround jump shot from Rudy Gobert, on all people, it just felt like that is the Wolves' night, that they're going to get this done. They're going to see this through the finish line. Like I said before, the Nuggets have an issue with depth. I looked a little stupid for those middle 3 games, but I came back again at the worst possible time for these Nuggets. Outside of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, the Nuggets got little to no production. Aaron Gordon was a no-show. He was completely shut down in the dunker spot, and they just deterred that Nikola Jokic to Aaron Gordon lob threat that was there. He didn't get after it on the offensive glass. Michael Porter Jr. was cold. He's been ice cold for the last 3-4 games. 3 of 12 in Game 7. KCP, he's already done pretty good defense, but he just is not there in Game 7. 2 out of 7. And the bench, it was just Christian Brown with 5 points. That was it. They really miss Bruce Brown, or a guy like Bruce Brown, in this type of series. I understand you let him walk because he's just priced out of your pay range, but just banking in on Peyton Watson to take his place and slide in there, being the next young piece, doing it on a budget, shows that they just got burned in that aspect there. They just could not find ways, because he didn't even see the floor in the last 2 games. 0 minutes logged for Peyton Watson. And what further got exposed for the Nuggets is that they don't really have guys outside of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic that can beat guys off the dribble. They're big catch-and-shoot guys off the 2-man game, and just sucking in a lot of bodies into the paint, or just to Murray and Jokic, but those other 3 guys are usually left fairly wide open. They were given opportunities, and they just chased them off the line, and they just could not make jump shots. They could not attack defenders. And again, that just comes down to the stellar defense, because after scoring 58 points, they only scored 32 in a quarter and a half. It was completely shut down in the second half. The Nuggets absolutely need to make some adjustments this offseason. I think they tried to get away with a very thin roster. They just maybe need somebody off their bench to either ascend, maybe Peyton Watson take to the next step, or they find an actual veteran. Certainly missed a Bruce Brown type of component there, but they'll find somebody else. I'm sure a lot of players that want to play for this Nuggets team, absolutely. But the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to the conference finals for the first time in 20 years. I thought about how they got here, this tenacious defense. They have this rising superstar, maybe future face of the league, a guy that really fits the mold, and maybe he's just not there yet. He's only 22, but I mean, this kid is phenomenal. He's playing with such ferocity and making impact when his offensive game isn't going. He saw it in the Phoenix series. When his shot isn't going, he still makes impacts. His fingerprints are all over that game, and it doesn't really show up in the box score. So credit to Chris Finch and his amazing staff. They figured something out, and now the Minnesota Timberwolves are advancing to the conference finals for the first time in 20 years. The young Indiana Pacers have exceeded expectations. Early on, we thought they were a nice story. They're very high-paced offense thanks to Tyrese Halliburton, but they were just missing some pieces. But they made some moves in the trade deadline. They got Pascal Siakam, and he's been great integrating himself into this Pacers team, and they have made some couple upsets. They upsetted the Bucks in a 3-6 matchup. They beat the New York Knicks, and now they play the top overall seed in this NBA playoff bracket with the Boston Celtics. It's going to be interesting to see how the Celtics match up against this very hot and fast Pacer team. Now, the Celtics are coming into this matchup very well rested. They've only played 10 total games, lost 2 overall, and Jason Tatum, despite him not being super consistent, has been there in those closeout games. I think Jaylen Brown has been great consistently through this postseason run, and they should be getting back Kristaps Porzingis. The Pacers are certainly interesting. They're fast. They are playing with house money because they haven't been here in a long time. Tyrese Halliburton is certainly an all-star, budding star, absolutely. But let's see how exactly they match up. The thing is, with the pace, absolutely, I think the defense of the Boston Celtics have the ability to bother Tyrese Halliburton. They have Derek White, they have Jaylen Brown, a couple big bodyguards to try to slow down this Pacers offense. They have the size factor as well. I think that Al Horford, and you'll see some Kristaps Porzingis when he's healthy, at least, beyond Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner. And it's going to come down to them maybe getting into a track meet with the Indiana Pacers, but I think absolutely have the ability to do so. They live and die by the three-pointer, as we know, but when they're hitting shots, and it's at a very high clip. It is a make-or-miss league, as many say, but I do think that they have the capable shooters to knock down those shots on a consistent basis. Even in the regular season, they did average over 129 points a game in 5 matchups against the Pacers. So it's not like that the Pacers' defense is anything substantial. It's just more like they have to really get out on the run and just try to outscore you, and it's going to be at a very high cliff. You could see a few games in the 130s, absolutely, and I think it's very possible that we'll see some track meets in this Eastern Conference matchup. Out of respect to the Pacers, I wouldn't say they get gentlemen swept. I think that they have the ability, just because they've been so good at home. They play in front of that field house of Pacer fans so vibrantly. They have the energy and they have the crowd. I don't think they'll steal a game in Boston, but they'll at least hope for a couple games. Maybe it goes back to Boston 2-2, but I'll pick the Boston Celtics in 6 games to get back to the NBA Finals yet again. The Wolves are back in the conference finals for the first time in 20 years, and the Dallas Mavericks have found a way to get a little bit extra rest, closing out their series in 6 games rather than 7, and they will fly over to Minnesota for their Game 1 matchup on Wednesday night. The Wolves have a well-oiled machine. They have elite wing defenders that can play very aggressively and basically harass Kyrie and Luka, I think, all game long. They have some depth between Jaden McDaniels, they have Ant, they have Mike Conley, who's a solid point guard. They have Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming off the bench, who is a very long, rangy wing defender as well. And those guys can really be aggressive because they have the luxury of very talented, imposing bigs on the back line. They have Rudy Gobert, the Defensive Player of the Year, Cat, who is at least a big body to deter players from getting out on inside the paint. Those twin tower concept, which is dated in modern NBA terms, but there's the factor of Cat's ability to shoot jump shots, especially from three, is an ability to really help them out and kind of change the mold of what modern NBA defenses are, with small ball being a hot trend as of late. Luka and Kyrie have their work cut out for them. I think that they have the ability to go off in certain games, but they absolutely need to get their role players going as well. I think that their ability to knock down threes is going to keep them in this series. They will be definitely trying to collapse the paint, get the Wolves in rotation, and then eventually work the ball around to a PJ Washington or a Derek Lively, a Josh Green, a Tim Hardaway. One of those players are eventually going to work themselves open, and that will give the Mavs a shot in this series. I think the size factor favors Minnesota. When you add in Naz Reid, who is the sixth man of the year, with Gobert, with Cat, that is a big-time advantage against Derek Lively Jr. and Daniel Gafford, who are been good, and they have been good in this postseason run, but they're nowhere near just two out of those three that I named on the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think they've been solid, but it's not even a close matchup there, and I think that's the difference in this, that the fact that they can have three bodies to potentially get rebounds, and they can shuffle them in, and you'll likely see at least one of them on the court for all 48 minutes of this game, no matter what, and that'll be a big time advantage for Minnesota. They have probably the more healthier superstar compared to Anthony Edwards and Luka Doncic. Doncic has been banged up every which way this postseason run, and even healthy, it would take a Herculean effort, I think, to make this a long series, and even for the Mavericks to win this series, I think they have a puncher's chance, don't get me wrong. And while I'm tempted to say the Wolves win in 5, I think out of respect to the Mavs, I'm going to say that the Wolves win in 6 games, and they will make their first ever appearance in the NBA Finals. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Really helps Spectator Sports grow. Shout out to Joy for editing this podcast. And remember, if you want to get clips from this episode, you can get it here on YouTube or TikTok and Instagram. And if you're interested in just the audio, we got that on Spotify as well. All links are in the description. Thanks, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, guys.